The first thing that happens is that all of you are going to be divorced at about the same rate as people would have 30 years ago. Because rich people still get married. And they generally don't get divorced. Poor people do not get married. And that's like 60% of the population. And it's ramping up quick. And there's no evidence whatsoever that that's anything but catastrophic. So kids who are raised by single parents do not do as well. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't some single parents who are doing a stellar job. Obviously there are, and there's some married parents that do a terrible job. That's not the issue. The issue is the bulk of the evidence, and the bulk of the evidence strongly suggests that children who are raised with two parents do better. Well, duh. Why? Well, why? It's impossible to raise children. Jesus, they're expensive, they're troublesome, they're smart, and they're useless. You know, so, and you've got them for 20 years. It's like, you're going to do that by yourself? Sure you are. You know, you're going to be working at a horrible job 40 hours a week or more, like a retail job, for example, where they just treat you like a slave. And then you're going to go home to your miserable kids exhausted. It's like, that's not fun. And you know, it's increasingly the norm for huge chunks of our population. Like, elitist liberal types, like all of you, for example, don't pay much attention to what happens to people who are actually poor. But as far as I can tell, it's been a bloody catastrophe for them. You know, there's an old saying, when the upper class gets a cold, the lower class gets pneumonia. And you know, the thing about that saying, it's true. It's like, it's not a metaphor, it's literally the case. If an epidemic sweeps through a population, the population dies from the poor people upward, because they're so damn stressed. So, you know, I would say, with regards to marriage, I've been married a long time. It's just about 26 years now, you know, and I've noticed a bunch of things about marriage. One is, two brains are better than one. And so if you actually communicate with your partner, because they're not like you, it's like you have a corpus callosum between you know, and they'll tell you things that you don't understand. You know, like when you're being stupid, you know, in a typically feminine way, say, or a typically masculine way, or in whatever stupid way you manage to be stupid. They'll point that out to you, you know, and that can be really helpful, even though it's extremely annoying. You know, and they can help you make decisions, and they're a good place to confess to. You know, and it's really helpful when you're trying to figure out how to discipline children, so that you're not a pathetic milksop who lets them run all over you, or some tyrant who, you know, likes to beat them with a stick when they sneeze. You know, hopefully you kind of find some pleasant middle ground in there. And it's a lot easier to do that with two people than with one. And then they can spell you off when you're exhausted. Particularly useful if you have small children, because you will be exhausted when you have small children. You know, plus the narrative of your life has continuity. And that's nice. You know, and if your home is set up properly, it's actually a pleasure to go to it. You know, it is a buttress against the chaotic and uncaring external world, because the external world in many ways doesn't give a damn about you. You know? So if you go home and it's set up reasonably well, it's like, hey, you've got somewhere to belong. That's not so bad. Well, you know, some situations are like Humpty Dumpty. Right? There's no putting it back together. Yeah. Now, but again, in terms of avoidance of those situations, it's like, you think about that hierarchy again. Well, divorce is a low-resolution, high-impact solution, because it just tears a chunk of that hierarchy out and throws it away. That's a lot, and it's costly. Yeah. It's going to hurt you. Okay, so then you think, well, what might you do instead of that? And the real answer is solve the damn problems as they arise. You know, and that's hard, and it requires drilling down. It really requires drilling down. So one of the things I want to build, for example, which I haven't built yet, it's kind of like going to be like this future authoring thing that you guys do. I want to build a problem-solving matrix for couples. Because here's how not to get divorced from your wife. Figure out how to set the table properly. Now, what does that mean? It's really, really complicated. It's like, who's going to cook? When are they going to cook? Why are they cooking? How should you respond to it? Who buys groceries? What are the groceries going to be? Who's going to put them away? How do you say thanks when someone does something for you in the domestic environment? The roles are gone. Okay, and what that means is you better be awake. Because it turns out that running a kitchen in a house is unbelievably complicated and difficult. And so you have to negotiate how to do it. And you're a terrible negotiator. You don't know how to decompose the damn problem to the point where you can solve it. You won't admit what you want. You won't admit what you're like. You won't pay any attention to what actually irritates you. You know, so you like to think that you're nice and easy to get along with, but you're not. You're basically Hitler. You know, and so until you realize that, you can't even tell your partner what you want. And so this is where philosophy hits the road, or hits the ground. You know, it's like try negotiating out a stable solution to how you're going to run the kitchen. Because that's where the battle between the sexes, by the way. There's two places where it really hits. One, who's going to take care of the little kids? Two, who is going to work in the kitchen and under what circumstances? It's like, you figure those two things out, you can consider yourself a philosopher. Cost for not doing it is low quality food in a hostile environment, bratty children that you hate, resentment, hostility, the accumulation of insults and assaults, and either a divorce or a really unhappy marriage. So there's the problem with agreeableness. With conscientiousness, well, if you're conscientious, you're industrious and orderly. And orderly people seem to be sensitive to disgust, which is something we'll talk about in detail later. We've had a hard time specifying exactly what makes industrious people industrious, because it's hard to come up with an animal model for that sort of thing, and there's no theoretical model. But our latest idea is that, it's not my idea, it's actually the idea of my graduate student, Christine Brophy, is that industrious people find it unpleasant and unsettling to not be doing something. So it isn't so much that industriousness makes them happy or fills them with positive emotion. That would be more extroversion, right? Because extroversion is the positive emotion dimension. It's that industrious people can't stand sitting around doing nothing. And you know, this is speculation, but you know, human beings are obviously always engaged in the exchange of labor, especially the reciprocal exchange of labor. And you can imagine that in a community where everyone knows everyone, the people who work hard are going to be pretty irritated on a fairly chronic basis with the people who are completely unproductive. And my suspicions are that plenty of people who were completely unproductive in the history of the evolution of our species were wiped out by people who were unhappy with their lack of productivity. And so I think, generally speaking, human beings have this sense of ethical obligation with regards to one another to share labor. And people who are conscientious really, really feel that. So they feel bad if they're not busily working on something that's productive all the time. And so the advantage to being with someone conscientious is, well, they're going to work like mad, but the disadvantage is they're going to work like mad. So, you know, if you're looking for a partner that you want to relax with or have fun with, or who isn't uptight, then a conscientious person is probably not a very good choice. On the other hand, if you're a conscientious person and you're living with someone who's really unconscientious, that's good because they might be able to help you relax, but you're not going to be happy with them because they don't work nearly as hard as you do. But even worse, on the orderly dimension, you know, some of you have had roommates and maybe you're more orderly than your roommate. What does it mean? It means you're annoyed by mess before they are. And you don't have to be annoyed by mess much before your less orderly roommate for you to be the one that's always running around picking things up. And so actually, one of the things that's emerged from the psychometric analysis is that women are slightly more orderly than men. And I suspect that has something to do with the, what would you call it, inequitable distribution of housework. Because even if imagine that your proclivity is to be triggered by disorder 25 seconds before your partner's. Well, you're going to end up, it doesn't take much difference for you to be the one that's always concerned about the mess first. So anyways, and so if you're a really orderly person and you live with a disorderly person, well, good luck getting along with them. They're going to regard you as like uptight and over concerned with details and unwilling to relax, that's for sure. And they're going to regard you as, well, just a bloody mess. And how can anyone possibly live with someone like you? And so another reason why it's useful to understand your personality is because I think it gives you a better crack at finding someone that you can actually live with over the long run. And we don't know what the optimal, I don't think you want to live with someone who's exactly like you, because
then both of you have the same strengths and weaknesses, and there's a bit of a problem there, right? Because maybe an agreeable person can use a bit of a disagreeable person around them to balance each other out, and vice versa, right? So we don't understand the optimal balance.